Getting good at this. Hey, in this week's video I'm going to be looking at and talking about the OG Novation Circuit, especially in light of the recent release of the Novation Tracks, and looking at how relevant this still remains. I'm going to be giving a brief overview on some of the features on this, although I'm sure many of you have seen those before, and then looking at the pros and cons I've found from a user's perspective over the last 18 months. So stick around. So for a quick overview of these were released back in October 2015, and the circuit was Novation's addition to the world of grooveboxes, a term which was coined by Roland back in 1996 in reference to its MC303. The 4x8 grid features two synth tracks based on the Novation Nova synth engines, used obviously in the Nova, the Mini Nova and the Ultra Nova of almost a decade earlier. Now these engines are capable of 6-note polyphony. Along with the two synth tracks there are also 4 sample-based drum tracks. Now with its small lightweight form factor, the built-in speaker and the battery power, the circuit was obviously designed for portable on-the-fly use, which if you've mastered the thing inside and out, it's perfect for. But for anybody else, having it tethered to an available editor program really is the best way to get the most out of this machine. As unfortunately without access to the editor, for access to the synth engines inside, it's really just a preset box with no real control over the synth itself from the front panel, save from the macro knobs. This for me was the biggest failing or con for the machine, that depending on what patch you have selected for the synth part, the continuous endless rotaries shift their function depending on the designer of each patch. This makes them fairly unpredictable, which is great in some respects as it forces the user to experiment with them to find out what parameters they control with each patch change, and obviously leads to much sonic exploration and many happy accidents. And being able to motion record these parameters into your sequence is just great. As a side note here, MIDI control over not just these parameters via the macro knob positions, but a fairly comprehensive list of CCs and sysx control over mod matrix destinations. It's worth checking this out. It's something I've had a lot of fun playing with in the past, and I have videos available of this also. Going back to the shifting macro functions, they make confidence in mastering what could be a simple machine difficult. Novation say that this is designed to encourage a hands-on approach to the groovebox, along with the obvious lack of labels, which it undoubtedly does, but it does make it unpredictable as an actual instrument. Now there's much written on these already, which is testimony to their popularity, along with a number of forums and groups for the users and fan base, which is of cult-like proportions. So I'm going to stick to just my own personal criticisms of these, many of which Novation have just seriously addressed at the point of writing this in early June 2021 with the release of the Novation Circuit Tracks. It seems that despite such continuous firmware updates over the years, of which there's been many, the time has finally arrived to revamp the hardware too. So my former gripes on the lack of audio inputs, pattern length, expandable storage options, like 0, these have been resolved on the tracks, but obviously still apply on the OG circuit. Another con for me here, which is still unavailable on either device though, is the lack of audio over USB, which is a shame, as being able to multi-track record and edit these in a DAW would just be amazing. Now that pretty much covers all of the pisses for me, so not many, but enough to stop me from using this as a serious piece of gear in the studio. The pluses, however, are all pretty strong case makers for the lasting popularity of this thing. It is hands-on and it is a lot of fun. For sketching out a few ideas quickly on your travels, then it's hard to beat. And as mentioned, the available editor really does open these up for deeper and more serious use. Personally, I got into making electronic music and using hardware via the Groovebox route, as did so many. And prior to the release of the circuit, the Groovebox market, samplers aside, was fairly dominated by the Korg Electribe range. And to this day, even the EMX1 is still the benchmark to which I compare most gear in terms of how usable it is. And it wasn't until I got the Roland MC707 that I found something which blew the EMX1 out of the water in the Groovebox stakes. Certainly something the EMX2s were incapable of doing, which is something I'll cover in an upcoming video. So, is it still going to remain a cult piece of gear post-Tracks? Or will it become obsolete? Now only time will tell. But Novation does have a reputation for creating future classics, and I believe that the quirky nature of this machine will help it to maintain its following for years to come regardless of tracks. Sure, there's not much at a first glance at least that couldn't be done with a phone now, but to hardware fans that's beside the point. And being able to use this as a standalone MIDI sequencer and controller is another great reason to own one. So I don't think that despite the tracks that we've seen the last of the circuit quite yet. So anyway, as ever, many thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, I hope you found it useful or entertaining. As ever, leave any comments or questions in the comments section below. Feel free to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I also have Patreon if you're interested in buying me a coffee to help me sponsor my gear addiction. That'd be fantastic. I'll be looking at giving away merch there over the next few months, along with possibly some gear raffles. So please do consider it. Thanks again.